Hello everyone and welcome to our Tech Tuesday tutorials number 99. Today we look at coronavirus data visualizations and we explore exponential growth. I had planned to release a Tech Tuesday today about Book Creator, but then I watched Governor Kemp's live update last night and I started noticing a worrisome trend on social media. And I felt like I needed to make this video. Every week matters. Let me start by saying that this video will focus on sources of data and information for the coronavirus. It's not a video about the virus itself. I do not speak for Georgia Southern, for First District RISA. I'm not a medical professional. Indeed, I want to be clear that I echo the advice given by Governor Kemp's office, the World Health Organization, and the CDC. Instead, this video's purpose is to help inform you as to where you can get reliable information and make informed decisions. We'll also be looking at the technology behind some of the information, such as data plotting, data visualization, and discussions about mathematical concepts such as exponential growth and spreadsheets as a prediction and analysis tool. Finally, I will be sharing a new announcement from Google as to what they are doing for schools struggling with the idea of remote learning. So let's get started. I will say that this video is a bit ad hoc. I had to get this out as soon as I could. This is a last minute video. So it will not have the editing and production values of some of my other videos. It will not have a lot of humor or memes or things like that. The first part of this video may actually seem pretty dark, but I want you to keep in mind that we can take solid actions against this and look at other countries and see what they have done. All in all, we should be listening to the scientists.
I'm broadly scientifically literate, but what I will say of this virus, I think we're in the middle of a massive experiment worldwide. And that
where are the guinea pigs?
Maybe. The experiment is, will people listen to scientists? In this case, referring to medical professionals. In this particular case.
Say Anthony Fauci over at Allergy and Infectious Disease.
For example, yeah. And are you washing your hands? And are you taking these precautions? These are warnings offered by scientists. And
for our own good.
For our own good. And it seems to me, if we all listened and all paid attention, don't freak out, right? Don't live in, a life lived in fear is a life half lived. So you don't want to, I'm just... So I'd be interesting if we all paid attention to what scientists say. Maybe the coronavirus will just blow on by.
I've put together a little document to list all the sites I'll be showing you today on this video in case you need it. So here's the link, tiny.cc/COVID19 info. If tiny.cc is blocked in your district, you can also use the link that is in the description of this video that is a much longer link that is not a shortened URL. Right, so one of the biggest problems I'm seeing right now is that people just aren't informed. They may be hearing stories on the news, but those are all over the place. People are posting on social media that it's not even as dangerous as the flu. And others are saying that we're all going to die in a month. Neither is true. For an update count of cases globally, I would refer you to the Johns Hopkins University global map. This is updated multiple times a day. And as of right now, we are at 116,000 cases worldwide. That is worldwide, so keep that in mind. 80,000 of which are in mainland China. Most of the other ones are in other countries. However, I would note that we're at 761 in the US. And just a week ago, the number was much, much, much lower. This website also does show the total number of deaths and total number of people that have recovered from the virus and are doing well. You can see trend data here and hover over that. The orange one there is China. The green are total recoveries, and the yellow, as you can see, it's starting to trend upwards, is other locations outside of China. You can look at active cases versus the cumulative cases as well. And if you need to get this on mobile, you can pull this down up here at the top and choose mobile version. Not a bad idea to have that on your phone, just kind of get an idea of what's happening. You can also access the data plots there as well. Now this is global, so it doesn't really give you the smaller picture of what's happening locally or in your area. For that, I would tell you to take a look at this Google map of coronavirus cases. I like this one a good deal because it has specific icons and layers that you can turn on and off. Over on the left-hand side, you can disable informational ones. You can even disable suspected cases. And you might disable all the recovered cases as well, leaving only those that are confirmed or cases where people have been deceased. What I like about this map is that if you click on any of these things, you can see that they cite their sources as to where they got that information from, and they link to it. The third link here is Worldometer, and it really just shows a good bit of numbers. I like this one because this particular link is focused only on the United States. So you can see that we have up to 729 with 27 deaths and 15 recovered. More have died than have successfully recovered at this point, but that number is going to change. This is the graph that I think people need to really understand and see a little bit more. A couple of weeks ago when they said, oh, we only have about 20 cases or so in the US, we don't have that many. Then it jumped up to 50 because we got the cruise ship and so on. And people are like, oh, it's no big deal. Yet the last week or so, we have seen a huge jump from 100 to 704 cases. And this is following a trend line. This is a typical parabolic curve for exponential growth. So you can see the cases per day have jumped up. We did have a decrease that was good, but otherwise they're pretty much following that trend line. And then number of active cases the same one you saw. Deaths will follow a similar line, although obviously not nearly as high, much lower number, but still the same kind of trend. What's interesting here is you compare United States, which is pretty early in the situation here, and compare that to Italy, which is another first world country that has decent medical care. And look at this. This looks really similar. Only our trend line is slightly sharper than theirs was. Same kind of thing, and they're at 9,000 right now and continuing to climb at the same rate. Now take a look at South Korea, which has been very aggressive in how they are dealing with coronavirus. And look at their trend line. And theirs is very interesting. Theirs went up and then started to taper off. That is not a coincidence, and it is not just because the virus itself has run longer and is just harmless. It's because they were forced to take aggressive action. And they now have 5-minute drive-through tests and screenings at 99% accuracy, and they're testing 180, 200,000 people by now. And so they're making great efforts to kind of keep this under control, and they're taking action. So it's doable. South Korea is a wonderful case that we can look at, and just looking at the visuals again here, where we can kind of see that aggressive action can make a huge difference. Finally, you can look at China, and this is a good opportunity to have a discussion with your students. China's went up and then immediately just kind of, well, not immediately, but eventually just tapered off, and it's kind of leveling out. Well, if you're a social studies teacher, you can then start talking about China and their censorship policies. You can start talking about how information is getting harder and harder to get from China, how these numbers may not be accurate, or how China is taking very strong stances against this to make sure that no one infects anyone else. Is that constitutional? Would that ever fly in America with our senses of freedom and liberty? Is that something we would ever want to happen in America? Your social studies teachers could have a lot of discussions here. Even your language arts teachers would be looking at these graphs and data and being able to then communicate, put into words what you think about these things, these cases. Again, this isn't meant to panic, because we have seen where South Korea and China are able to kind of control this in their own ways, and how Italy is struggling with this in the same way that the US is going to be as well. So we can look to Italy for our future, or we can look to South Korea for our future, depending on how much action we take and how careful we are about this. So you need to know a little bit more about coronavirus itself. Again, I'm not here to tell you all about it. I'm here to point you to where you can go get it. So the CDC does have some really good information and handouts and flyers and things like that you can print out and put at your workplace. So it tells you how it spreads, how it doesn't spread. They also describe what the symptoms are and how to go into treatment and prevention, even treatment at home if you feel like you need to self-quarantine, and what you do if you are sick. First thing is you probably should call your doctor instead of going there, for example. Going to the doctor's office might not be very good for everyone else if you do indeed have it, whereas if you call them, they may be able to arrange a test in a way that does not contact a lot of other people and sit you in the waiting room kind of thing. The World Health Organization has a lot of really good resources on coronavirus, including how to protect yourself, any of your questions answered, travel advice, and even media resources, which include videos and so on that you can watch to get a better understanding of this. They do have a special Mythbusters page that I think is particularly good. These are myths and things that are just not true. Cold weather cannot kill the virus, and things like that. There's some here like, do mosquitoes carry it? They do not. Do pets carry it and infect you? They do not. You don't have to quarantine your pets and things like that. So one thing I really like about this, next link here is symptoms of coronavirus, the flu, and allergies. What we don't want is a lot of people panicking and saying, oh my God, I think I have coronavirus because I've been sneezing. So this kind of helps ease some fears and not make a lot of people panic. Right, so information for specific audiences here. The CDC's has some information for people here, including information if you're staying at home, what do you do, how to plan ahead, some checklists to get your household ready, and so on. The CDC is telling people that you should go ahead and make reasonable, non-panic preparations to be able to be at home for up to about 2 weeks if you need to be. There's some information on childcare and schools, specifically with some information on guidance for administrators of school systems and what they should be doing, how to clean and disinfect, and recommendations for the classroom. So these are really important for our K-12 folks, a lot of our audience to look at. Higher education also has similar advisories here from the CDC and the workplace as well. Google decided to give a free upgrade to all G Suite customers, particularly with education, and is going to be giving them all the features of the G Suite Enterprise Edition with regards to Google Hangouts. That means you can have larger meetings, up to 250 people in a Hangout participating in the Hangout. And you can live stream it to up to 100,000 people within your own domain. So you could actually broadcast out a quick message or training session or anything else to your entire school district and everyone could see it. And finally, you're able to record meetings and save them directly to Google Drive with just one button. You just go down there and click on the record and it starts saving it to your Google Drive so that you can have that for anyone else later and post that up on your website and so on. This is huge when you start looking at the use of Google Classroom and using that to help with instruction at home. Right now, only Fulton County is shut down, and only for today until we hear more tonight. But I expect that based on trend lines and based on stuff like that, you're going to see a lot more schools shutting down in the next 2 weeks. So let's talk a little bit about people at higher risk. The CDC's description of higher risk are people who are older adults, and that number really is starting to get up into the 60s and 70s, as well as people who have serious chronic medical conditions, such as heart disease, diabetes, and lung disease. One of the things about that, though, is that nearly half of all adult Americans, according to Science Daily, have cardiovascular disease. How bad is it? That's another thing. But high blood pressure is a definite factor. In fact, you can take a look at the Worldometers and looking at the existing death rates for COVID-19. The important thing to know about is that the average mortality rate for COVID-19 is in the roughly 2% range. So that's what you're hearing a lot where people are like, oh, it's no more worse than the flu. Well, actually, the death rate for flu is 0.1%. The average person here up to 30 years old is 0.2%. So you're already double that. But the total average of everyone is in the 2% range, which means you're pushing 20 times more likely for death. Also, there's a lot higher hospitalization rate with COVID-19. COVID-19 has about a 15 to 20% hospitalization rate. So if 1 million people get affected, you're going to be looking at 200,000 people in the hospital. That's where things start getting a little bit crazy because your hospitals just don't have that many beds. The real threat comes to people 50 years old and higher. That number jumps, and then it jumps again, and then it really jumps, and then it's crazy. So nursing homes, retirees, and stuff like that are going to be kind of a big deal. In our school systems, we do have a decent amount of people who are retired. Now, this is if you're healthy. Make sure you understand that. This is for healthy or average people. Once you start adding comorbidities, cardiovascular disease, the death rate for all cases total averaged is 10.5%. Some are lower because they're younger, some are higher because they are older. Diabetics have a 7% death rate. Chronic respiratory diseases, 6.3% death rate. Hypertension, high blood pressure, 6% death rate. So again, 100,000 people get affected. You're looking at 6,000 people dying. And that's not something to sneeze at, to use a terrible metaphor. But so when I see people posting this online saying, oh, it's no big deal, the flu kills 20,000 people. Well, That's because the flu has a much, much lower death rate. And the numbers on this seems to be much, much more infectious than the flu is. So it's not something to just hand wave and dismiss. One thing I wanted to take a look at here was a spreadsheet that I saw someone put together that looks at the date, how many cases, new cases, how many total cases we had, and then they kind of calculated what the average growth rate was for that day. It fluctuates a lot at the beginning, mostly because we were having a lot of information that was just not being very clear. These are cases outside of China. So you can see that the decline in the growth rate varied wildly. The big thing to note is that growth rate isn't static. People start taking precautions. People start doing things to kind of avoid the virus, and the growth rate may drop. In some days, the growth rate may increase because a particular cluster was infected, or we started finally testing in a certain city, and we have all these numbers that come up out of nowhere. They were already infected. We just didn't know it. What's interesting about this is if you're looking at this is a typical Google spreadsheet. You can use the Explore function in Google Spreadsheet, as I mentioned in a previous Tech Tuesday video, to look at some things like this. Like I can look over here and just select all this information about the percentage increase or decrease in the growth rate. And if I do that, I can hit Explore, and I can see that the average of that, I only have to do a formula, the average of that is negative 0.17%. So it's dropping by about 0.2% every day. Now let's say we're optimistic and we say we want that growth rate to drop by 0.5% every day because we're doing public campaigns to wash our hands and stay away from big areas and things like that. Currently, the growth rate as of yesterday was 14.94%. Well, let's drop that down by 0.5% every day. And if we keep doing that throughout time, it's going to eventually drop to probably a bare minimum of, let's say, 0.17. What's interesting about that is if that number does not continue to drop, if it stops, we can actually take a look at this data and say, okay, let's look at date, let's look at total cases, and let's look at the projected amount as well, because these should overlap a little bit. In fact, this was projected a couple of days ago to be at about 30,000 and 36,000. We are lower than that. That's a good thing. And so that's the chart of total cases and projected. And you can see the blue, that's where we stop with our real data, but then the red continues on. This is such a big table that it's really hard for us to kind of read this. But you can see if nothing changes and we make a few efforts, but otherwise don't do much else, these numbers start going up into 30 million infected, if that trend line continues. Let's scale it back and let's not project so far into the future. Let's just go forward about 60 days. So we're on day 40 or so. Let's go to day 100, again, based on exponential growth. This is where we're at. This is our tiny little bit right here. And eventually, by March 22nd or so, we will be somewhere in the 220,000 infected range, and then upwards into the 500,000 by April 5th, and then continuing on to 1 million by May. If we scale this back so we can see a little bit better and go up to just, let's say, 70 days, then we can see this a little bit better in terms of where we're at. The numbers, again, haven't changed. We're still hitting that same target number. By about March 22nd, we can expect 200,000 infected, and it's currently March 10th. So in about 12 days. And about 7 days out, we're going to be looking at about 100,000 people infected outside of mainland China. The crazy thing about that is, while you may say that that's alarmist and that's pretty high, that is following the actual trend line of what we have for infected cases right now. That's just math, people. That's looking at exponential growth, and that's looking at what happens if we don't make a lot of changes. Now, our numbers are going down a bit. So here's the good news. If you make a change, and let's move this out of the way for a second. If we make a change and say the decline here, we wanted, so let's say we took this number from 0.5% decrease every day to 0.55% decrease. Now, we're starting here with, if we pursue into March 21st, we're looking at 175,000, right, infected. If we bring that number down to 0.55% every day, just a slight increase, then our March number would be 168,000 by March 21st. So that's a fairly decent little reduction of a few tens of thousands. If we reduce it by 0.6% every day, because we do proper procedures and so on, then we're down to 161,000. But that number, these numbers change more as we go a little higher or further along. So if we took this number and went to 80 days, that's 20 more days, then our efforts will be much, much bigger. But you can see we start looking more like South Korea as we take small actions and make a small difference in the infection rate per day. So this is why there's hope. This is why you absolutely shouldn't panic. This is why you need to take precautions, and why you might think, oh, it's just a tiny little thing, it's no big deal, is actually a very dangerous thing to do. In fact, like I said before, panicking is the second worst thing you can do. The third most is remain ignorant. Don't learn more about this, and keep perpetuating just things and forwarding things you see on social media. Fourth most unhelpful thing you can do is do nothing. Keep going about your business, do what you were doing before, because that, as you can see with the trend lines, that just keeps that exponential growth going. The worst thing you can do, in my personal opinion, as a tech guy who's looking at data, is to be flippant or underestimate this. This virus is much deadlier than the flu. If you're flippant about it, you might actually perform actions that are more dangerous than doing nothing. You might decide, oh yeah, I'll show them. I'm going to go to that concert even though I'm sick. And you may take behavior that is actually dangerous to everyone else. So absolutely don't panic. We do have a lot of options that will help get these numbers under control, but we need to start acting now. Right. So Governor Kemp's most recent update said, for the most part, I did transcribe some of it here. Here's the link to the actual video you can watch. But the big thing he's saying is that, absolutely wash your hands. It's one of the biggest things you can do, because you won't transmit what you've touched to your eyes and nose and mouth. I told my daughter, think of it like if you had glitter on your hands, and if you weren't careful, where would that glitter show up? So wash your hands. You should wash them as if you'd been cutting jalapenos and you're about to take out your contacts. So a good 20-second wash with warm water and a lot of soap. Soap is absolutely wonderful against the virus. In fact, I'll link to an article on the science behind why soap in particular is so good. It's better than hand sanitizers. It's partly because of the chemistry behind soap and how it dissolves the fatty protective coat around the virus. Yeah, soap is absolutely essential, and it's cheap and it's abundant, so use it. Stay home if you're sick, particularly if you're not sure of what you have, or if you're exhibiting some of those symptoms of COVID, which remember, shortness of breath is a unique symptom. Go ahead and get a flu shot. This is according to Governor Kemp, so that you lessen the severity of flu in hospital beds so that they can free them up for other things. Stay healthy, get plenty of sleep, because lack of sleep affects your immune system, which then makes you more susceptible to everything. And if you're having to go into the doctor for anything, then that's one less person that they're able to see for something that might be really severe. And it's also more likely you're going to come into contact with people who are sick with COVID-19. Right, so again, please do not see this as a reason to panic. Panic is one of the worst things you can do, but also take action. Go ahead and start being careful around people. Avoid large gatherings if you can do that, particularly if someone is sick. Don't go into work if you're sick, things like that. And start planning for remote learning, remote work, if possible, in your field. I would say, in short, keep calm and wash your hands. All right, so that's all I have for you guys today. I won't say that I hope you enjoyed this video, but I do genuinely hope you found it useful. And take care. If you'd like to follow our channel for more updates on things like this and technical things, hit that subscribe. But yeah, take care out there, guys. Bye-bye.